Welcome back to Smith's G5 Football Review. We'll be talking about Week 2 action from the college football world. G5, of course. UAB at Miami. We'll start the week off there because that is where the week started. UAB went 3 for 15 on third downs, really hurt them in this game. Miami absolutely torched them on the running game, rushing for 337 yards on 52 attempts, averaging 6.5 yards a carry. UAB had 11 penalties for 75 yards. That is not a good thing for them. Obviously, can't do that, especially when you're going against a team that has much more talent than you. Aaron Mitchell had 8 receptions for 117 yards for UAB. Noah Wilder, UAB's linebacker, had 15 tackles, a sack for the game. UAB's defense, non-existent, was not there. Nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. Final of this game was 31-14 Miami. My prediction for this game was Miami would win 42-34. A little bit high scoring of a game, but ended up 31-14. Next, we'll jump into Charlotte at Appalachian State. App State totaled in 308 rushing yards on 50 attempts. Just phenomenal game for them running the football. Both teams had pretty decent amount of penalties. 7 for 65 yards for App State, 5 for about 63 yards for Charlotte, 2 turnovers for Charlotte, 3 turnovers for Appalachian State. Third down was pretty effective for Appalachian State, going for 60%, 6 for 10. Charlotte, not so much, 4 for 14. That could hurt you in a game. Total yards, Charlotte. Let's get some defense in there, right? 512 yards of total offense for Appalachian State, 286 for Charlotte. Charlotte's passing game wasn't great. Wasn't great. Charlotte's Chris Reynolds had 140 yards and 2 interceptions. That's it. App State's running back Marcus Williams tore it up. 13 carries for 102 yards and a touchdown, averaged about 7.8 yards a carry. Also, App State wide receiver Thomas Hennigan had 5 receptions for 120 yards and 1 touchdown, so he had a pretty good day there. We will talk about Ben DeLuca. Charlotte's defensive back had 16 total tackles and a forced fumble. Their linebacker Tyler Murray also had a day, 14 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss and an interception, so good day by him. Final of this game was App State 35, Charlotte 20. My prediction was App State would win 35-13, so pretty close there. Just missed Charlotte's score by a touchdown, and that was going to wrap up that game. Next game we'll get into is UL Monroe at Army. ULM struggled early. Entire game really struggled. Their offense only getting 9 first downs. Their 2 first possessions were 3 and outs. Can't do that against triple option offense. They'll eat that up on you all day long. Army went 7 for 13 on third downs and 3 for 4 on fourth down conversions. Army racked in 465 total yards of offense. ULM struggled to get 200. Army's run defense really stout, only allowing 37 yards on the ground. 4 penalties each last week. A major concern for Army was their penalties. They had 4 this week. I talked about time of possession in my predictions for Army, and they were able to do what I said, totaling 36 minutes and 47 seconds of time of possession. ULM's 2 turnovers absolutely hurt them. They could have really made this game close if they didn't have the mental mistakes. The end of the half, they had the terrible clock management. I don't know what they were thinking. Terrible clock management. I understand Corona was a thing, but you don't need to practice physically practice time management. You do, but just tell your guys, like, hey, there's barely any time in the half and we have 2 timeouts. Let's try to go get a score when we're down, 14-0 or 14, whatever the score was at the time. Army ended up getting the ball back, and they ended up getting end of the half field goal, which made it 17-7. So we'll just get right into it. ULM QB, I'm sorry I forgot his name, but he finished 14 for 19, 148 yards and a touchdown. Not a bad day from him. When he did throw it to his tight end, it seemed like it was working, but they weren't just getting the play calls in that seemed to be working. Jacoby Buchanan, fullback for Army, tore them up. 11 carries for 106 yards, 9.6 average, and 2 touchdowns. Army's quarterback Christian Anderson also had himself a day for 21 carries, 95 yards, 4.5 average, and 2 touchdowns as well. And then we'll talk about a wide receiver for Army, which we don't usually talk about because they run the ball all the time. An absolutely phenomenal catch from Isaiah Alston, like insane catch, just really stretching out, catching the ball, barely letting in his hand. Another inch left or right, probably would have been incomplete, but great catch by him. The guy we got to talk about for ULM is their linebacker, Travion Webster. He was extremely physical. He was manhandling Army players. My gosh, he was a wrecking ball the entire game. He totaled in 11 tackles, just extremely physical player. Army had a little bit of trouble matching his physicality until it seemed like they really started putting Jacoby Buchanan in his face. Army linebacker John Radigan finished with 6 total tackles, 1.5 sacks, and 2.5 tackles for loss. Good game from him. Final of this game was 37-7 in Army's favor. My prediction was Army would win 31-13. So again, I was decently close on that one. Figured Army would have a little bit more trouble with this team than Middle Tennessee State. They did, whether it was for their mistakes or not. ULM Monroe played a much more physical game with Army than Middle Tennessee. They really matched that physicality. Next game we'll talk about is Coastal Carolina at Kansas. Kansas. I'm surprised they haven't kicked you out of the Power 5 yet. Gosh. First possession of the game for Kansas. Coastal Carolina takes it away. They capitalize right off of that for a touchdown. Next possession, Coastal Carolina forces a fumble. Yet again, Coastal Carolina capitalizes on that mistake. Another touchdown. So immediately it is 14-0. Immediately. Coastal Carolina pretty much capitalized on all the mistakes that Kansas made and effectively led them to a 28-3 halftime score, put them in really good position. Coastal Carolina was 8 for 14 on 3rd down. Pretty good day for them there. Coastal Carolina totaled in 318 yards. I'd say the only concern for Coastal Carolina this week was they gave up 367 yards, which is a lot of offense. Definitely one area they can get better at. Still won the game though. Of course, they forced 3 turnovers, so that certainly helped a lot. Just really causing all kinds of mayhem on Kansas offense. Turn the ball over. They get the 2 early scores off turnovers. That will win you games every game if you could do that without turning the ball over yourself. Coastal Carolina's quarterback, Grayson McCall, pretty decent day. Definitely not, anything mind-blowing. 11 for 18, 133 yards and 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns is impressive, but other than that, just a pretty good game management day for him. Their defensive tackle, CJ Brewer, he had 4 total tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 3 tackles for loss, so quite a day from him. Eddie Gallagher, Coastal Carolina's linebacker, 9 total tackles. Final of this game was Coastal Carolina 38, Kansas 23. My prediction was Kansas would win 28-20, especially after last year's upset. Coastal Carolina beat them last year as well. I thought Kansas might bounce back and talent might be a factor. I was so wrong because Coastal Carolina really took it to Kansas, and Kansas really needs to consider leaving the Big 12 or wherever they're at. Just get out of the Power 5 because you do not look like a Power 5 team. Next game is the exciting game, the offensive explosion of UTSA at Texas State. Both offenses went off. 499 yards of total offense for UTSA, 474 yards of total offense for Texas State. UTSA's run game went off for 330 yards on 51 attempts, taking a page out of the Service Academy books, really there. UTSA, though, the penalties, 11 penalties for 126 yards. You could have had over 600 yards of total offense if you cleaned up those penalties, and 11 penalties, really? I mean, just clean that up. Just got to clean that up. Texas State had 2 turnovers in this game. That was kind of a focal point, especially how close this game ended up being. Most of the game, it seemed like UTSA controlled pretty well. They always seemed to be up by like 10 points, and then there was a series where Texas State was able to come and tie the game, and we will talk about how they tie the game in a sec. We'll talk about UTSA's running back, Sincere McCormick, had a day. 29 carries, 197 yards, 6.8 average, and a touchdown. Have a day. Texas State's quarterback played pretty well. Tyler Vitt, he had 26 for 39 with 346 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So definitely a good day from Tyler Vitt. Obviously, wasn't enough. The two interceptions could have really hurt them, which did, obviously. UTSA's Rashad Wisdom had 10 total tackles, tackle and a half for loss. And then we'll get into Jeremiah Haydell. So we're getting towards the end of regulation, and UTSA has to punt. And Jeremiah Haydell, who had that ridiculous catch a week ago, zips it and goes down the field and scores the touchdown to tie it. They tie the game with, I don't even know how much time was on the clock, but it was really close to the end of regulation, and momentum shifts completely. They were only down by 6, so they already tied the game. The extra point will win the game. They go to line up to kick the extra point. Their kicker misses. All you had to do was kick an extra point to win the game, and you missed. Granted, the kicker's a freshman, but it's an extra point. You gotta just line that up and just get it through the upright somehow. I mean, come on. An extra point would have won them the game, and they missed. So yeah, that kicker's name is Alan Orona. He also missed a kick that was pretty much on the goal line, awkward angle though, in overtime that would have put them ahead. He missed that. So essentially right there, you kind of knew that UTSA was going to end up winning, and they kicked a game-winning field goal. Kicker made it, won a game, and it was over. 51-48 was the final in overtime. My prediction for this game was UTSA would win. I believe I picked UTSA. I'll have to get back to you on that. But the score was 27-20. I had it. I might have picked Texas State. I'll maybe edit that in the video a little bit. Next game we'll talk about is Tulane at South Alabama. I said this game could be pretty interesting, especially after South Alabama's win last week against Southern Miss. South Alabama really controlled most of this game. Really throughout, really controlled it. At one point, we got a report saying Tulane's coach said they were seeing ghosts. Okay, now we're seeing ghosts. That's great. Tulane looked really gassed. There was no energy on their sideline until all of a sudden they started storming back and eventually won the game. But both turned the ball over once each. Tulane went 2 for 12 on third down. Just terrible day. You got to convert those third downs. Tulane running back Tajay Spears, 11 carries, 106 yards. South Alabama's wide receiver Kawan Baker had 7 receptions, 129 yards, and a touchdown. So good day from him. Wasn't enough. Tulane ended up winning 27-24. I really don't know how South Alabama really controlled the entire game. Almost until the end, where Tulane decided to win the game after their coach was literally saying that they were seeing ghosts. Figure that one out. My prediction for this game was Tulane would win 28-20. Tulane would win 38-28. My prediction was right on who would win, but the score was a little off. Again, the actual final was 27-24. I picked this game being 38-28. Next game, I didn't have a prediction for. I actually was back and forth on covering this game. Ended up covering it because of what went down. Louisiana went into Iowa State, a top 25 team, and beat them by 17. What's going on, Power 5? Don't use the Corona excuse. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Everyone had a shortened camp. I don't want to hear it. Nope, don't want to hear it. Both teams put up pretty good numbers. Louisiana forced 2 turnovers. I think that was kind of like the highlight of where you can see where this game went wrong for Iowa State. Even just going through the recap, just seeing like there was nothing really that stood out that said this is where Iowa State lost the game other than those 2 turnovers. Other than that, Louisiana had less yards, less first downs, less time of possession. Everything pointed in the way of Iowa State winning this game, which they didn't. Power 5? Not so sure. Anyway, each team seemed to just feed off of whatever the other one was doing. You know, if one team punted, the other team would follow with a punt. If one team turned the ball over, the other one would follow with like a missed field goal. If the other one turned over, it'd be followed over by a turnover. You know, it was just insane. You know, when a turnover on downs led to a turnover, whether it was a fumble or interception, and whether it was a touchdown followed by a touchdown, it seemed like all game long that's just what the story was. The game ended in Louisiana's favor, 31-14, going into Iowa State and just beating them flat out. Good job by Louisiana. Next game, another game I was back and forth in covering, but because of the outcome again, I will talk about it. Power 5 again. Seems to be struggling a little bit there, huh? Kansas State, you lost to Arkansas State. Arkansas State really seemed to get off the field, only keeping Kansas State to only 1 third down conversion out of 11. Clapping there because that's impressive. That's good. That will win you football games. Arkansas State totaling 489 yards of total offense. Kansas State really didn't capitalize on any of the mistakes that Arkansas State did make. Both teams missed field goals. Don't know why. It seemed like the weather there was pretty good. Maybe the wind was a factor. Not sure. But both teams did miss field goals. Arkansas State's quarterback Logan Bonner went 17 for 28, 204 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 turnovers, 1 being an interception, 1 being a fumble. Still a pretty good day for him. Just clean up the turnovers a little bit, and that'll be pretty good performance from him. Arkansas State's running back, 16 carries, 95 yards for Jamal Jones. And another guy that had a day was Arkansas State wide receiver Jonathan Adams Jr., 8 receptions, 98 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So pretty good day from their receiver. Arkansas State Ellery Alexander had 9 total tackles. The final of this game was Arkansas State 35, Kansas State 31. Again, Power 5 who? That pretty much wraps it up. So good day, especially for the Sun Belt. I think the record was like 3-0 against the Big 12 or Power 5 conference this week. Good performance again by Army, really just controlling the game, even struggling a little bit there in the second quarter. You know, Tulane, South Alabama was a good game. The Texas State UTSA game was fantastic. If you love offense, that was the game for you. I think it was double overtime, whatever. Really high scoring game, a lot of offense. I'm more of a defensive kind of guy, but still exciting game to watch. Really fun. Good football this week. And this is why I'm making this channel. There is great Group of 5 football. Just because it isn't for a national title or you don't have a number, a ranking in the top 25, it doesn't matter. This is still very good football. If you are a football fan, you will love Group of 5 football. They play their hearts out. They have good games almost every week. Start watching Group of 5. And that's it for this week's recap